The new bride in Nyaru. The sun rose slowly over the village of Nyaru. Smoke drifted from clay huts, and the sound of a goat bleating echoed through the narrow paths. Sade adjusted the colorful wrapper around her waist and stepped carefully over the uneven ground. Her husband, Juma, had gone to the fields early, leaving her alone with the excitement and unease of her first few weeks as a bride in his family home. Sade's heart swelled with hope but also trembled. She knew that life in her new home would not be easy. Juma's older sister, Amina, had always been jealous of attention directed toward others, and Sade had heard whispers of her cunning nature from neighbors before the wedding. Amina's eyes followed her from the doorway, sharp and calculating. At first, Sade smiled politely, pretending not to notice the subtle digs and cold stares that greeted her every move. The first incident came at breakfast. Sade had prepared a small dish of millet porridge and fresh fruit. She had learned from the elders of her village that the first meal she offered her new family should be given with respect and care. Amina, however, quietly moved the bowl, spilled a little, and whispered to Juma that Sade had been careless. Juma looked surprised, his brow furrowing. Sade felt her face heat, but she remained calm. She thanked him for the food and said nothing, knowing that any outburst would only fuel Amina's satisfaction. Over the following days, Sade began to notice the pattern. Small acts of sabotage appeared everywhere. Amina would misplace utensils, whisper false stories about Sade's habits to the neighbors, and question her cooking. Sade endured the subtle attacks silently, observing Amina carefully. She remembered the advice of the village elders: patience is a weapon, intelligence is a shield, and cleverness wins battles that brute force cannot. Sade decided to follow that wisdom. One afternoon, while fetching water from the well, Sade spoke quietly with her mother-in-law, Mama Zuri, a wise woman respected by all the villagers. Mama Zuri noticed Sade's cautious but attentive manner. "Child," she said softly, "do not fight with anger. Learn the ways of our family and the ways of Amina. Observe her, understand her, and then act. Strength is not in shouting or proving yourself. Strength is in knowing the right moment." Sade nodded, taking the words deep into her heart. She resolved to study Amina's behavior carefully and to turn every attempt at sabotage into an opportunity for clever response. The next day, Amina tried to embarrass Sade in front of the neighbors. She suggested that Sade had forgotten to sweep the courtyard before the arrival of visitors. Sade smiled politely and offered to show the neighbors a new method of sweeping that preserved the patterns in the sand, a method she had learned from her own village elders. The neighbors admired the neat patterns and complimented her skill. Amina's eyes narrowed as she realized her attempt had backfired. Sade had turned ridicule into admiration, but she knew this was only the beginning. That evening, Sade prepared dinner carefully, making sure every dish was seasoned just so, every pot clean, every leaf placed with care. Amina, intent on finding fault, tasted a small sample and then dramatically dropped the spoon. "Too much salt," she exclaimed. Sade remained calm. She poured a little water into the dish, stirred gently, and offered it again to Amina and Juma. Juma tasted it and smiled. "Perfect," he said. Sade had deflected another attack without anger, using patience and clever thinking as her tools. Word of Sade's tact and skill began to spread quietly among the villagers. Women who had doubted the new bride now nodded respectfully when they saw her. Even some of Amina's friends started to admire her calmness under pressure. Yet, Sade knew the battles were not over. Amina's envy and cunning ran deep. Sade needed a plan that would reveal intelligence, patience, and moral strength all at once, without creating open conflict in the household. She spent the night thinking, recalling the lessons of the elders, and weaving a strategy in her mind that could turn every attack into a step forward. The following morning brought a shocking moment. Sade noticed Amina whispering to a neighbor about a supposed mistake she had made while preparing Juma's clothes. Sade calmly waited, observed, and then acted. When Juma received his clothes, Sade pointed out a small tear that she had mended overnight and suggested a new way to fold them that would keep them neat for weeks. Juma was impressed, the neighbors watching silently. Amina's face fell as she realized that her attempt to discredit Sade had not only failed but had elevated her standing in the eyes of everyone. By mid-morning, Sade's plan began to show its effects. Villagers who had come to gossip now asked her advice on household matters, cooking, and even herbal remedies. Her intelligence and patience were visible in every gesture, every action, every word spoken. Amina, frustrated but cautious, realized she could not openly attack without risking her own reputation. Sade had transformed her attacks into lessons that showcased her skill and wisdom. That afternoon, a sudden commotion at the village well drew everyone's attention. A group of children had accidentally let the goats loose into a neighbor's maize field. Sade rushed to the scene, organized the children, and led them to herd the goats safely away. In doing so, she prevented a conflict that could have angered the entire neighborhood. The villagers whispered in admiration at her calmness and clever handling of the situation. Amina watched silently, her envy growing. Yet she could do nothing without exposing her own pettiness. As Sade returned home, she felt a quiet satisfaction. Each day, she was turning potential humiliation into respect. She was learning the rhythms of her new household and the dynamics of her extended family. She understood that winning required patience, observation, and subtle action rather than confrontation. That night, as she lay beside Juma, she reflected on the lessons of the elders and the power of wit over envy. But just as Sade felt she was gaining control of the household, an unexpected note was slipped under her door. It read simply, "You may have won today, but the battle has only begun." Sade's heart quickened. She knew that Amina's jealousy ran deeper than she had anticipated. A storm was approaching, one that would test not only her patience and intelligence but the very strength of her new marriage. The next day began quietly, but Sade could feel the tension in the household. Amina moved with a sharpness that suggested she had already plotted her next move. Sade, however, had learned to observe before acting. She knew that patience was her greatest ally and intelligence her sharpest weapon. Every word, every gesture could turn the tide in her favor if used wisely. As she prepared breakfast, Sade noticed Amina lingering near the stove. The sister-in-law made a subtle comment about the porridge, suggesting it was too thick and would spoil the appetite. Sade smiled politely, ignoring the edge in Amina's tone. Instead of responding with anger, she invited Amina to show her the method she preferred. Amina, caught off guard by the invitation, demonstrated quickly, thinking she had embarrassed Sade. Sade nodded thoughtfully and said, "Your way is interesting. Perhaps we can mix it with my method to make it even better. Juma will enjoy it, I am sure." The neighbors who had come to visit watched with curiosity. They noticed how Sade had not only avoided conflict but had also involved Amina in a way that made the sister-in-law feel included. Amina's expression flickered between surprise and irritation. Sade had taken the first step in turning jealousy into cooperation, or at least into an appearance of it. Later that afternoon, Sade ventured to the village market to fetch herbs for cooking and remedies. She noticed Amina whispering to some of the women who sold vegetables and grains. The whispers carried hints meant to embarrass Sade, claiming she lacked skill and was trying to control the household. Sade, walking with calm composure, approached the women. She greeted them warmly, asked about their families, and inquired about their crops. Her kindness and intelligence drew smiles and respect. Even Amina's allies were forced to step back, realizing that Sade's presence and charm could not easily be undermined. Back at the house, Sade found another subtle trick waiting for her. Amina had hidden Juma's favorite cap, knowing it would cause minor frustration. Instead of accusing her, Sade gathered the children and suggested a game to find the missing items in the house. The game brought laughter and lightness, and soon the cap was found. Juma laughed, amused at the clever way Sade had handled the situation. He began to see her not just as his bride, but as someone wise and patient, capable of diffusing tension without anger. The following evening, Mama Zuri called Sade aside. "You are learning well," she said softly. "Amina is clever and will not stop her tricks easily. But if you use your wit and your understanding of people, you can guide the household without ever raising your voice. Never underestimate patience and observation. Watch, listen, and act at the right moment." Sade nodded, grateful for the guidance. She knew that the battles ahead required more than clever words. They required strategy, timing, and an understanding of human nature. The next week, Amina attempted a bolder plan. She spread a false story in the village that Sade had insulted a neighbor's daughter while visiting. The story reached Juma, who looked concerned. Sade calmly invited the neighbor and her daughter to visit. During tea, she treated them with respect, asked after their family, and praised the daughter's diligence in helping her mother with chores. The neighbor, realizing the story was false, smiled and reassured Juma. The villagers witnessed Sade's integrity and tact. Amina's plot had backfired once again, making Sade's wisdom apparent to all. One afternoon, Sade faced a test that would challenge her intellect in a different way. Amina had hidden some of the household food supplies, hoping to make Sade appear careless. Instead of panicking, Sade took a quiet inventory, discovered the missing items, and left a clever note for Amina. The note read, "I hope you enjoy helping me keep our home organized. Together we can make it stronger than ever." The gentle tone confused Amina. She had expected anger, not tact. Sade's intelligence had turned a potential conflict into a lesson in cooperation. By nightfall, word of Sade's calm and clever handling of situations reached neighboring villages. Women shared stories of the young bride who outsmarted the jealous sister-in-law with patience, intelligence, and subtle strategy. Even men began to admire the way she guided her household. Sade realized that her approach was working. She had turned envy into admiration and resistance into cooperation without raising her voice or creating open conflict. But that evening, as Sade prepared for bed, she discovered a new challenge. Amina had left a message on her pillow. It was short but sharp. "You may have won the eyes of others, but the heart of the household is mine. Do not forget who I am." Sade read the words slowly. She understood that Amina's jealousy would not end, and the battles ahead would require more cleverness than ever. The sister-in-law had grown bolder, and Sade needed a plan that would secure peace and respect permanently. The next morning, Sade rose before sunrise, her mind restless with thoughts of Amina's note. She knew that patience alone would not be enough to protect her household. She needed the guidance of the elders who had raised her and the wisdom she had learned from years of listening and observing. Quietly, she gathered herself and walked to Mama Zuri seeking counsel. Mama Zuri greeted her with a warm, knowing smile. "Child," she said, "you have done well to maintain peace and earn respect. But Amina's jealousy is deep. She does not act out of malice alone. She fears losing control. To guide her, you must show strength without anger, intelligence without arrogance, and patience without passivity. The household will follow the example you set. Lead with wisdom, and hearts will follow." Sade nodded. She had learned from experience that confrontation would only make Amina more cunning. Instead, she needed to guide the household subtly, teaching lessons through action rather than words. She returned home, resolved to turn each of Amina's attempts at sabotage into a lesson for the family, a demonstration of intelligence and respect. Later that day, a minor crisis occurred. One of the younger children accidentally knocked over a jar of dried beans. Amina immediately moved to blame Sade for negligence. Sade calmly gathered the beans, showing the children how to sort and store them properly, turning the accident into a lesson on responsibility. The neighbors visiting the household watched her calmly instructing the children and praised her ability to manage the situation without anger. Amina's expression darkened, realizing her attempt to cause embarrassment had only highlighted Sade's wisdom. Over the next few weeks, Amina attempted increasingly subtle schemes. She would misplace utensils, suggest false rumors, or question Sade's cooking. Sade's responses were measured and intelligent. When utensils were missing, she invited Amina and the children to organize the kitchen together. When rumors were whispered, she addressed them gently with kindness and patience, often turning them into opportunities to showcase care and leadership. Her calm, clever approach began to earn not only the respect of her husband, but the admiration of the extended family. One afternoon, Sade noticed Amina sulking near the village market. Villagers whispered that Amina had been plotting to embarrass Sade during a communal cooking event. Sade, however, smiled to herself. She had anticipated such a move. She prepared her ingredients meticulously and arrived early, inviting Amina to assist. During the event, Sade subtly guided Amina's actions, turning every possible mistake into a teaching moment. The villagers watched, impressed by Sade's ability to work with even those who opposed her. Amina's schemes failed again, and her frustration was obvious, though unspoken. That evening, Juma approached Sade quietly. "I have seen how you handle everything with grace and intelligence," he said softly. "Even when Amina tries to disrupt the household, you turn her actions into lessons for all of us. I respect you more than I can say." Sade smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart. She had begun to secure her place not through argument or force but through wisdom, patience, and careful guidance. But challenges were not over. One morning, Sade discovered that Amina had secretly invited some neighbors to spread false stories about Sade's origins, suggesting she was inexperienced and could not manage a household. The villagers gathered, whispering and observing. Sade stepped forward calmly, addressing each person with politeness and intelligence. She recounted her experiences and the lessons she had learned, demonstrating not only skill in household management but a deep understanding of community values. The villagers listened and nodded, and even Amina's allies realized their attempts had failed. By nightfall, Sade had begun to see a subtle change in Amina. The sister-in-law watched her with a mixture of envy and curiosity. Sade knew the moment had come to plant seeds of cooperation rather than rivalry. She invited Amina to join her in preparing herbal remedies for the children in the village who were sick. Amina hesitated but accepted. Sade guided her gently, praising her contributions and showing patience when mistakes were made. For the first time, Amina felt useful in a way that did not rely on jealousy. The villagers began to notice the change. Women who had once whispered about the tension in the household now spoke of Sade's intelligence and leadership. Even men, including Juma, began to rely on her guidance for decisions that affected the extended family and the village. Sade realized that by turning sabotage into lessons, envy into cooperation, and conflict into opportunities, she had begun to transform not only her household but the entire community's perception of her. But just as peace seemed within reach, an unexpected crisis struck. A severe storm swept through the village, damaging homes and flooding fields. Villagers scrambled to protect their crops and belongings. Amina panicked, unsure of how to help. Sade, calm and resolute, organized the family and neighbors, assigning tasks, reinforcing homes, and ensuring the safety of children and elders. Her clever planning and decisive action prevented greater disaster. That night, as the storm raged outside, Sade reflected on her journey. She had faced sabotage, jealousy, and attempts to undermine her reputation. Yet her patience, intelligence, and guidance had turned the household into a place of respect and cooperation. Amina, exhausted and humbled, sat quietly by the fire, watching Sade. It was the first moment in weeks that she had seen the power of wisdom over envy, the strength of calm over chaos, and the respect earned through intelligence and kindness. But even as Sade felt a sense of accomplishment, a new whisper reached her ears. A neighboring village elder had heard of her clever management and planned to visit, testing her abilities in the broader community. The news brought both excitement and anxiety. Sade knew that her reputation would soon face its greatest test, beyond the walls of her household. She had learned to navigate envy and sabotage at home. But could her wisdom impress an entire village council? The next morning, Sade awoke with a sense of purpose. The elder from the neighboring village was expected to arrive at midday. Villagers whispered among themselves, curious to see if the young bride could live up to the reputation that had spread through Nyaru and beyond. Sade calmly prepared her household, arranging herbs, food, and utensils with precision, ensuring that everything reflected care and order. Amina observed silently, her jealousy mixed with reluctant admiration. When the elder arrived, he was a tall man with sharp eyes and a measured presence. He greeted Juma's family with formal politeness and then turned his attention to Sade. "I have heard of your clever management and patience in the household," he said. "I have come to see if your reputation is well earned." Sade bowed respectfully and invited him to walk with her through the courtyard and kitchen. She demonstrated her methods for organizing the home, preparing food, and managing the children. Every step was deliberate, every word measured. Amina followed, unsure of how to participate. Sade, noticing her hesitation, gestured kindly. "Amina, perhaps you can assist me in showing how we care for the children and prepare the household together." Amina stiffened but then joined. Sade subtly guided her, allowing her contributions to be seen in a positive light. The elder observed closely, nodding at each demonstration. He smiled, impressed by Sade's intelligence, patience, and ability to manage not only tasks but people with respect and diplomacy. After touring the home, the elder addressed the gathered villagers. "This household is well managed, the children are cared for, and the family functions in harmony," he said. "This is due to the wisdom and cleverness of the young bride. She has turned jealousy and opposition into cooperation and respect." This is the mark of true intelligence and patience, the villagers murmured in agreement. Amina looked down, realizing that Sade's victories had not been through force or pride but through subtle guidance and cleverness. Over the following weeks, the household settled into a new rhythm. Amina, though still envious at times, began to work alongside Sade rather than against her. The children learned from both women, seeing that cooperation and clever thinking brought better results than arguing or scheming. The neighbors came to seek advice on household management, cooking, and community cooperation. Sade's reputation grew beyond her family, and she began to be regarded as a model of wisdom and patience for young brides in neighboring villages. One afternoon, as Sade and Amina were preparing a communal meal for the village, Jumu approached and placed a hand on Sade's shoulder. "You have taught me more than I could have imagined," he said softly. "Not only have you strengthened our household, but you have also shown that intelligence, patience, and respect can change hearts. I am proud to call you my wife." Sade smiled, feeling the warmth of his words. Her journey had begun with quiet observation and clever responses, and it had culminated in a household transformed by wisdom and patience. That evening, the villagers gathered around the fire to celebrate a successful harvest and the harmony of the household. Sade shared stories of patience, clever solutions, and the importance of understanding family dynamics. Young women listened intently, and even some older villagers nodded in approval. Amina, sitting beside her, could not hide her respect. She had learned that envy and sabotage only led to frustration, but cooperation and clever thinking brought honor and peace. Weeks turned into months, and Sade's household became a model for the entire village. Families from neighboring communities came to observe her methods and learn from her example. Sade taught not only cooking and organization, but also the deeper lessons of patience, strategy, and intelligence in navigating family dynamics. Her wisdom touched every corner of the village, and her cleverness became legendary. One quiet evening, as Sade sat outside her home watching the children play, she reflected on her journey. She remembered the early days when Amina's jealousy seemed impossible to overcome. She recalled the subtle attacks, the whispered rumors, and the small sabotages. Yet, through careful observation, patience, and the guidance of the elders, she had turned every challenge into an opportunity to teach, to guide, and to demonstrate wisdom. She realized that true strength did not come from force or pride, but from intelligence, humility, and the ability to act at the right moment. As the sun set over Nyaru, Sade felt a profound sense of peace. Her household was united, her family respected, and her reputation secure. Even Amina had begun to emulate her patience and cleverness, quietly learning that collaboration brought far more honor than jealousy. Sade had transformed not only her own life, but the dynamics of the family and the community. She had become a beacon of wit, patience, and intelligence, teaching the village that cleverness combined with respect and observation could overcome even the deepest envy. And as the stars appeared in the night sky, Sade smiled quietly. She had begun as a young bride facing jealousy and sabotage, and she had emerged as a woman whose intelligence and patience changed hearts and households. The journey had tested her in ways she had never imagined, but she had prevailed with wisdom, courage, and careful strategy. From that day forward, the story of the young bride who outsmarted the jealous sister-in-law became a legend in Nyaru, a lesson for generations to come. Newly married Sade faces constant sabotage from her jealous sister-in-law, Amina, who seeks to undermine her at every turn. Using patience, cleverness, and the wisdom of village elders, Sade turns every attempt at humiliation into a lesson in intelligence and respect. She transforms her household, earns admiration from neighbors, and teaches her family and village the power of wit, strategy, and calm leadership. Through subtle guidance and clever action, Sade proves that true strength comes from intelligence, patience, and the ability to turn envy into cooperation.